Right now, in your bathroom sits a roll of white perforated paper. You pull a few squares, fold it, use it, flush it, and move on with your life. You've done it 10,000 times. You'll do it 10,000 more. And if someone asked you to describe that ritual, you'd probably call it normal. You'd call it basic hygiene. You might even call it civilized. Here's the problem. That roll of paper isn't ancient wisdom. It's an accident. It's a 140-year-old Band-Aid created for cheap American plumbing. And for 99.9% of human history, every civilization that ever lived looked at the exact thing sitting in your bathroom right now and thought it was completely disgusting. So how did our ancestors, people who lived through ice ages, hunted apex predators, and built pyramids without machinery, solve a problem that every single human being has faced every single day since the dawn of time? They didn't just deal with it. They built wild, dangerous, and shockingly brilliant systems around it. And by the time this video ends, you're going to realize that your daily routine isn't the pinnacle of human progress. It's just the option that got cheap enough to sell in bulk. Let's start with a brutal experiment that doctors love to bring up. Imagine walking barefoot across a muddy field, and you accidentally step in dog manure. It gets all over your foot. Do you walk over to the kitchen, grab a dry paper towel, rub it across your foot 3 times, fold it, rub it again, and put your sock back on? No, you'd look like a complete lunatic. You'd run for a hug. You'd blast it with high-pressure water until every single microscopic trace was gone. Yet somehow, when it comes to human anatomy, half the modern world decided dry paper was the gold standard. If you travel across South Asia, the Middle East, or huge stretches of Africa, dry toilet paper isn't seen as modern. It's seen as bizarre. The default across billions of people for thousands of years has always been running water, a jug, a bidet, a hose, paired with the left hand. And here's the part that should humble every paper user watching. Modern dermatologists agree with them. Paper wipe, water washes. One of those actions cleans the surface. The other just relocates the problem. So the method people often write off as primitive is actually winning on basic biology. But what happened when you were out in the middle of a frozen tundra or a dense forest 50,000 years ago, far away from a warm stream? You had to improvise. And that's where nature became a total landmine. Before mass manufacturing, nature was your store aisle. But picking a leaf wasn't just a casual choice. It was a game of botanical Russian roulette. If your tribe lived in an area with broad, velvety mullein leaves, you were living in absolute luxury. It was nature's velvet. But if you picked wrong, if you grabbed a leaf of poison ivy, severe nettles, or the Australian jimpy plant, a shrub so toxic its sting causes months of agonizing pain, you were about to experience a week of pure nightmare. Somewhere in deep history, an unlucky ancestor figured out the difference between safe leaves and toxic nightmare plants the hard way. That knowledge didn't die with them. It got passed down through generations like a sacred survival manual. And when winter hit and the leaves died off, you moved to the next available tool, rock. Yeah, actual stone. When archaeologists dug up ancient latrines across the Mediterranean, they kept finding smooth, oval-shaped ceramic discs and rounded river stones worn down in a very specific pattern. They were called passoi. And this wasn't random desperation. In ancient Greek literature, there's literally a famous proverb, 3 stones are enough to wipe. In the early Islamic world, scholars wrote detailed hygiene codes outlining the exact number of stones required, usually an odd number, minimum of 3, and the precise technique to ensure cleanliness without injury. Think about that. Historical scholars literally sat down and authored an official instruction guide for stone wiping. If you think rock sound intense, ancient Rome takes the entire topic to a level of absurdity that sounds made up. The Romans were master builders. They built massive aqueducts, incredible roads, and public sanitation networks. But their daily bathroom routine would make a modern person freeze in horror. Picture a massive stone hall. No private stalls, no dividing walls, just 30 elite Romans sitting side by side on stone benches, thighed up, having full political debates while doing their daily business. And how did they clean up? They used an instrument called a tersorium. Picture a natural sea sponge jammed onto the end of a wooden stick. Here's the catch. There was only one tersorium per bed. It sat in a narrow trough of flowing salt water or vinegar at your feet. You picked up the shared sponge, used it, rinsed it off in the gutter water, and passed it to the senator sitting right next to you while continuing your conversation about taxes. Did it spread bacteria like crazy? Absolutely. Historians believe it was a major driver for intestinal parasites across the empire. But from a pure engineering standpoint, the Romans had continuous running water infrastructure built into public restrooms 2,000 years ago, while medieval Europe was still hurling wooden buckets out of castle windows. So how did humanity cross the bridge from sticks, stones, and shared sponges to soft paper? We have to look at 6th century China. Paper was invented in China, and for centuries, it was a high-end luxury item. By the 1300s, during the Ming Dynasty, official imperial records document that the court ordered over 700,000 giant, soft, perfumed sheets of paper specifically for the emperor's family. Using paper back then wasn't normal. It was a massive flex. It was the ancient world's equivalent of driving a gold gold-plated supercar. If you were using paper, it meant you were so unimaginably wealthy that you could take a manufactured, handcrafted material, something scholars use to record history, and throw it away after 5 seconds. Everyone else on Earth was still on the leaf, stone, and water rotation. So how did an emperor's luxury end up in a plastic multi-pack at your local grocery store? Fast forward to 1850s America. Even in places where paper was common, nobody bought toilet paper. You just used whatever paper was lying around. Old newspapers, political pamphlets, pages torn straight out of the Sears Roebuck catalog. In fact, the Sears catalog was so famous for this exact use that the publishers actually started printing it on softer, untreated paper, and they punched a pre-drilled hole in the top corner of every catalog so farmers could hang it on a nail inside their outhouses. Then, in 1857, an inventor named Joseph Gaiety introduced the world's first commercial toilet paper, and he didn't pitch it as a convenience. He pitched it as a medical cure. His newspaper ads warned the public that newsprint ink contained toxic chemicals that caused terrible sores. He soaked his paper sheets in aloe and literally printed his own full name on every single square. It was an absolute commercial flop. Americans were furious at the idea of paying cold hard cash for something they had been getting for free out of old department store catalogs. It wasn't until indoor plumbing exploded in the late 1800s that rolled paper finally won. Why? Because thick catalog pages kept clogging the tiny new indoor pipe. Rolled paper dissolved quickly in water. That's the entire secret. Modern toilet paper didn't win because it was cleaner, healthier, or superior. It won because it didn't ruin 19th century pipe networks, and factories made it cheap enough to sell to millions. Look back at the full timeline. Humans have walked this planet for roughly 200,000 years. For 199,800 of those years, we adapted. We built water channels, developed plant botany, carved smooth stone, and engineered dedicated tools based on where we live. Mass-produced toilet paper has existed for less than 0.1% of human history. So the next time you reach for that paper roll, stop for a second. The question isn't whether ancient humans were primitive for not having toilet paper. The real question is whether the dry paper in your bathroom right now is actually the absolute peak of human civilization, or if we just let 19th century plumbing convince us to accept the cheapest solution available. What's your take? Are you team water, team paper, or are you bringing back the Roman sponge stick? Drop it in the comments and hit subscribe before your next break.